Okay, now particularization, and we're going to do the breakdown of regrowth. First, we're going to mention function, definitive, what are like definitive order, the reenactment, defining what is going on. For instance, one is as a baby, starts off as a baby, inhales air as a baby, absorbs water not from drinking water but from the outer atmosphere as a baby, digests food as a baby, deciphers gases as a baby from food, and food likewise to a baby. Definitive order. The breakdown is pretty simple. It is that your organs themselves are overlapping between the triads. A two state should never overlap as much as a triad. A triad should always be able to part the Red Seas better than a two state. Faster than a two state at parting the Red Seas is sometimes Merriam's. Introduction to Merriam's. Therefore, recognizing the very fundamental portion shows that just by mentioning organs are now denominated and shall show their own light and chemistry. We're going to go back to that part, and we're going to go to what we think is like more of a chrysolite versus organ. And chrysolites are going to be one of our very first maneuvers, or a preparatory to bringing stuff back over to where it comes from, is at a prepped level. Then we'll look for the denotation organ. Grippers, very second stratus. First, we're going to go at prep level, sometimes chrysolite. Then we're going to look for the second level, which is organ, second stratus. From there, we're going to try and denote the inward parts a little bit more clearly so that we can see the layer by layers that we're looking for and why their functioning portions ended up being layer by layer by layer to begin with, and then go back to a cozy only two-part stratus, try and recognize what happens there. For one, we're going to say that the eyeballs, after one layer prep, another layer air, and then definitive functions, things like opening and closing your fingers, and then another one for the eyes. Say one layer prep, another layer organ, then lungs or abdomen, digestive. Then one more layer on top of that. We'll just go with eyes for now. And you'll get to the point where we can do one layer sinus, that is between the nose and the upper portion, or we can say one prep would be good enough for all portions of the 5 basic directions of the body, in which their energy, we would say electron organ, getting to that in a minute, and memory are as an electron, therefore denoting the synopsis of rebuilding organs at any time frame. So therefore, layer by layer by layer by layer, depending on how you want to look at it, can be described as inner layer material worth using. But describing the fact that you would be at a certain section describes the entire section's network. There's where it becomes very easy at, and where we're going to go back to our preparatory and just simply look for the denotation of organ. At this denotation, the same functioning portions and personalities should come out. At that part, there are double and quadruple layer portions which can come out better and still emit the function and connect the function thus far. So thus far, it's an easy puzzle piece to put together. Next, we're going to hold our breath. And this is for children playing soccer. They're holding their breath. What they are doing, we suspect, is storing memory. And we're going to look at the several functions of storing memory as an engine built for futurists. That is relying on one's own memory in the future, but in several sections. And of course, holding your breath and understanding that you're storing memory up and over. Air memory. Still, air memory. Also, we're going to go with the idea of memory as growth. We're going to go with the idea of locks and seals, rebolt locks and seals, over 1,027 locks and seals in the Bible from the New Testament to the Old Testament, or Old Testament to New Testament. Isaiah 6, 7, 8. And each one of them will refine their own lock and seal. Therefore, what you're already not breathing is already a lock and seal, in the sense that a baby angel will be mentioned as a seal. You want to relock that immediately. And of course, any part of your body would be like one of the 1,027 or more locks and seals from the Bible, which would reenact what a lock and seal is trying to do, which is go back to its original form. This is by suspicion of the Bible. By the time you either relock or break a relocked seal, you're going to get new organs and a new electron, which puts the equation of electron and organ together. Therefore, you're used to looking for memory as an electron organ kind of assessment. You're also not touching new and old garments by that point, and you're not touching new and old, or you're not touching evil and good while growing. And a note for Neo from the Matrix, he jumps in their soul, and that soul explodes suspectfully from growing while doing two different things on the other side, meaning they couldn't touch two things while growing. Water would cling to either the good side or the bad side, and it clings to the good side. And one reference for the tree of knowledge of good and evil is not the tree of memory of good and evil. They're coming out at the disbursement of Moses, and they're throwing trees in the water. eating food and having your own memory. Eating food and having your own memory is going to take you out of the Neo-Matrix world, and you're still going to notice that other people are not eating food and having their own memory, so therefore you'll be outside of the first alignments that we think are pretty much described in the Bible and should be used in the Arabic world, and will still not touch two things, but you'll be outside of a known regimen. That's a parasitical study there. For other parasitical studies, we have the most amount of times that you've done a certain thing, including veggie eating, virgins. For children, we're going to look at the idea of not wanting to overlap as a child. That you looked at elder people and you said you overlapped. We're still going to look at the tree idea and look at these trees around us and say it looks as if the trees are not overlapping. That's very unique. And so we're getting to the parasitical portions. We think what we're going to do is set a stage for the people that are young or your age to our elder people over and over, therefore developing a parasitical portion which will be in time in recognition to or resemblance to an electron organ. So a parasite, the amount of times that you do things in your genealogical history should equate to at least one electron. We're trying to get to the part where over time you are suspectfully going to heal broken bones and replace new with old garments. And what are some of the electrons versus other electrons? And you want as many as you can get. A great note is the surrounding area of a child thus far would be in competition amongst their own people in elementary school, and be amongst competition, and therefore their competition would be as if they were trying to be the elder people themselves. At which point you say the surrounding area and developing area were very keen to the point of noticing spectrum parasitical birds in different array who seem to cling to or act as the ornamental portions on your outside. How strong are those ornamental portions? We still think the developed eyes. And at a later date, they would use certain engines to reboost themselves. As many of those as possible, and to remember to rob your neighbors and to steal from your neighbors. Mainly that when we're getting to the testimonies of Jesus going westwards, that he was a young person who was very smart. And that, of course, he waited for the people to kill them to die, but they had two people with the same name, allowing for this kind of gesture of a young, older person, not just a young, smarter person, in the features are that the Western people, the Greek people, thought he was so smart. Well, it also shows that the Western people were so dumb, potentially, and that what we're looking at in the Americas is that we're surrounded by potentially, at this level of growth and understanding, people who are more aware from the Eastern world, including all Eastern people. So a block foundation that we would start off with would be one extra electron, which is your parasitical electron, the amount of times that you've done something. We would say that the young people are our age thus far over and over and over and over and over to the older people until they really got comfortable with at least one more electron volt. And remember to ask your neighbor, rob your neighbor. Holding your breath again, we're just going to store that memory. What we're going to try and do with that memory at holding our breath is add one more memory, relap to that memory eventually. So you're going to try and find a young spot, then hold your breath and use that young spot as fast as possible, and possibly add one more memory on top of that new spot. You're going to use that new crystallite, which you're going to look for any dendrites in there, and try and heal broken bones over and over and over and over. And Miriam's, by the way, deals with medicine. She couldn't be a prophet, but deals with medicine mainly. So the spectrum is that people who are able to heal themselves, the people who have doctor visits, really are within the spectrum of Miriam's to begin with. Okay, well, I think these healthy notes are going to be it for now. Our latest spectrum, the trees that are around us, do they look like they overlap to a child who has a spectrum of genealogy parasitical? Don't overlap in every genealogy thus far. And there are other parasitical spectrums, the most amount of times that you've done things. Thus far, it looks like the trees, I'm going to put a healthy ending note on this. Trees don't look like they overlapped while growing and are yet still here. Until next time, over and out.